from Matthew chapter 3, beginning with verse 13 through 17. Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to be baptized by John. But John tried to deter him, saying, I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me? Jesus replied, Let it be so for now. It is proper for us to do this to fulfill all righteousness. Then John consented. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. This is the gospel of our Lord. If we go into a bookstore, we can find an abundance of books about leadership. Trying to remember the styles of leadership that I have studied in the past, I found online a listing of leadership styles. Now, almost all of them include the autocratic or commander type of leadership style that demands compliance. It's been popular throughout ages, and we still see it quite a bit today. Also listed are some of the following: bureaucratic, paternalistic, pace-setting, which is actually performance-focused, transactional, charismatic, democratic, or participatory. And the next three are the same: free rein or laissez-faire, or some call it hands-off. Transformational, visionary, coaching, and a very biblical one that Isaiah describes in 4 places in his book, which we call servant leadership. It's nothing new, and it's often discounted as unrealistic, self-defeating, even perhaps a bit crazy. Yet it is the path that we see Jesus choosing about 600 years ago after Isaiah's suffering servant passages were written. Isaiah insists that this form of leadership is what we should expect from one called from God, and is a style that is tougher than most. One may get bruised, but not broken, and the light that is generated will not be quenched. It is patient, nonviolent, merciful, refusing to execute justice by force, but providing tender care for the most vulnerable, for the ideas still coming to fruition. True leadership protects what is weak until it is strong enough to stand on its own. And it keeps gentle hands cupping around a flame until it can burn on its own. It reminds people of their calling, to be a light to others, to open the eyes that fail to see clearly, and to bring prisoners out of their dark dungeons. Rather than the autocratic leadership that has been self-serving, oppressing, and dividing people, and destroying our sense of community, servant leadership frees people to recognize how we can work together and celebrate the gifts of one another. Autocratic styles of leadership can destroy people in their lives. Servant leadership can restore people, offering them healing and actually creating new life. We see this demonstrated by Jesus' life and his baptism. As Stephanie Paulsell says, when Jesus rises up, newly baptized from the waters of the Jordan, he enters into a ministry saturated with the vision Isaiah bequeathed to him and to us. A vision of leadership guided by mercy and a hunger for justice. baptism means different things to different people in different denominations. To Roman Catholics, salvation is dependent on baptism. But to Protestants, salvation is a gift from God through the grace of Jesus Christ. It's not about what we do, but rather what God has done for us. Baptism is a recognition of our sin and our acceptance of God's grace. It's an entrance into the faith community, and it's an anointing of those who have been baptized into the ministry which God has called each and every one of us. In Working Preacher, Stephanie Buckhannon Crowder points out that God isn't ecstatic or overjoyed at Jesus' baptism. Rather, God is satisfied, content. We shouldn't be surprised because if we look at it, Jesus hasn't started his ministry yet. He hasn't done anything yet. Yet at this moment, Jesus is also teaching us through his example a few lessons on leadership. Many of us would say Jesus didn't need John to baptize him. Even John in the gospel questions it and wonders about it. But Jesus recognized that he needs to humble himself enough to allow those he and we serve to equip and nurture him and us. We need to allow others to do what they were called to do and honor the ministry that was theirs before ours. Often we are called to train someone to do the job that we are currently doing. What I was taught about leadership way back was that our job is to give our job away, to help someone else rise to be able to do it. So what we are supposed to be doing is showing someone how to do whatever it is we do. So you're showing them and teaching them, and then you're letting them assist you. And then you assist them the next time. And then you let them do it their way. And you have to sometimes really let go. But every church needs people who train multiple people so that if something were to happen to any of us, someone else can continue the ministry that we started. Jesus surrenders to John's wilderness work, recognizing its significance, as well as the outcast and the marginalized that reside in that place. Sometimes we have to follow someone in order to lead others. But what Jesus was doing was saying that John's ministry is viable. And in fact, it is the ministry that Jesus will continue. Jesus chooses not to circumvent or rush the process in order to get into his own mission. While Jesus received precious, expensive gifts from the Persian elite, Jesus knows he needs to dwell with those left out, challenging the classism and the imperial regimes that are all around. There are no trumpets, and there's no archangels at Jesus' baptism, or even at ours. It is sufficient to have the Spirit of God descend on Jesus and on us, and to know that God is good and content. I don't know about any of you, but I know I'm not setting the world on fire, and I'm not pleasing everyone. But that's to be expected. Servant leadership usually means upsetting some folks along the way. We weren't called to make everyone happy. We were called to be faithful. There are days that we fail, but there are times when we surrender to God and let God work through us, and even in spite of us. And often it's in those times that we get it right. I'll share a story from way back. in seminary, one of my professors shared the story of his first funeral in ministry. The funeral director had offered to give him a ride to the cemetery, but having been taught that ministers should always lead the procession, he insisted that he needed to be the first and he needed to drive his own car. And the funeral director said, okay. So he walks up and puts his bright red sports car in the very front of the procession, and he starts off, and he's really impressed with himself, how great he's doing. And then he starts thinking, well, where is the cemetery anyway? So he decides to look in to see if he could stop and maybe ask the funeral director where he needs to go. And he realizes no one is following him. Not a car in sight. And he taught us the lessons that if you're going to lead, you need to listen to others and have some idea of where you're headed. Sometimes we get impatient and we try and rush the process. And we think we know best, but we don't always. So even if God isn't always ecstatic, sometimes we may get it right. And maybe then we can imagine God smiling, being content. Jesus lived out Isaiah's servant leadership and changed the world. We can think of others like Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr., who did likewise. Wouldn't it be nice to have some leaders around us, like perhaps politicians or our bosses, or perhaps a few others that you can name, who rediscovered and embraced servant leadership? God is calling all of us to listen to Jesus, learn from Jesus, and follow Jesus as servant leaders. Let us remember and rediscover who God has called us each to be. In Jesus' name. Let us